There is a strength in stillness that most people will never understand, because it does not shout, it does not chase, and it does not seek to be seen, but it is felt by everyone. We live in a world that celebrates noise, fast answers, loud confidence, constant movement, but true intelligence, especially in women, is often quiet, not because it is afraid, but because it is centered, grounded, whole. A highly intelligent woman is not always the one with the highest degree or loudest opinion in the room. She's the one who can walk away from chaos without needing to prove a point. She's the one who doesn't confuse attention with respect. She's the one who knows. The way I treat myself sets the tone for every relationship I have. So this is not a talk about how to impress. It is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming aware. Because the moment a woman becomes aware of her habits, of how she moves, thinks, reacts, she unlocks a quiet power that changes the atmosphere in every room she enters. Let's walk together into that awareness. If you're new here, welcome to Self-Mastery, where we share timeless wisdom to help you protect your energy, elevate your mindset, and walk in purpose. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a message that speaks to your soul, strengthens your spirit, that could shift your entire path. Let us begin. There is a difference between being silent and being still. Many people remain quiet on the outside, yet their minds run like a crowded marketplace, full of noise, bargaining for approval, afraid of judgment, craving applause. But a highly intelligent woman learns something few ever do. Inner silence is not about removing sound. It is about removing conflict within. She doesn't avoid people to protect her peace. She simply doesn't allow everything to access her attention. Her mind becomes a sacred space, not open to all conversations, not exposed to every emotional weather. And this is not born of arrogance. It is the fruit of clarity, the kind of clarity that is born from repeated experiences of what happens when you trade your inner calm to solve outer chaos. She has learned through life, perhaps the hard way, that constantly engaging in arguments to prove her worth, constantly explaining her boundaries, constantly reacting to others' emotions, it doesn't bring peace. It only exhausts her. In neuroscience, there's a concept known as cognitive load. It refers to how much information your brain is processing at any given moment. Too much stimulation, whether from negative conversations, emotional conflict, or even overthinking, triggers stress hormones like cortisol. Over time, this overload weakens the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for decision-making, self-control, and empathy. But when a woman learns to guard her inner silencer, she protects that sacred space. She gives her mind and body the space to regulate. And this simple act becomes the foundation of emotional intelligence, not just in theory, but in how she shows up in relationships. Imagine a woman who is always reacting. Her partner says something insensitive, and instantly she snaps back. Her boss overlooks her work, and she's boiling inside. Her friend forgets to call, and she takes it as rejection. Her life becomes a series of emotional roller coasters, exhausting, ungrounded, unstable. Her nervous system never feels safe. But now, imagine another woman. Her partner raises his voice. She pauses, breathes, and in that pause, she doesn't just hear his words. She sees his pain. She doesn't match his chaos. She stands in her own calm, and from that calm, she chooses a response that is wise, not reactive. This is the power of inner silence. It is not weakness, it is mastery, and it transforms how people treat you. In Eastern teachings, there is a phrase, "The wise one drinks water, but hears the ripple." It means she not only lives but listens deeply to life. She feels energy. She notices when someone's smile doesn't match their eyes. She senses what is unsaid in a conversation. Because her mind is not full of noise, she sees clearly. a woman like this becomes a mystery to others. Why? Because she is not predictable. She doesn't fight every battle. She doesn't attend every drama. She doesn't participate in every argument. And in a world addicted to reaction, her restraint becomes magnetic. People feel something different in her presence, a groundedness, a quiet knowing. And yet this silence is not just spiritual, it is practical. In the world of relationships, it is the difference between conflict that escalates and connection that deepens. There's a story of an older woman in a village who was known for resolving disputes between couples. People would go to her, expecting advice, but she would often sit in silence for long minutes, eyes closed, simply listening. When asked why she delayed speaking, she said, "I wait for the truth to rise from the silence, not the anger, not the fear, the truth." This is the kind of woman who doesn't speak from her pain. She waits until her wisdom has returned. And only then does she offer words. Science supports this. Studies show that when you give your mind even 90 seconds of silence after emotional stimulation, the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, calms down, allowing the logical brain to re-engage. Meaning, if you wait just a little before reacting, your chances of saying something wise instead of something you regret increases dramatically. Highly intelligent women understand this, and so they practice silence, not just in meditation or morning rituals, but in the middle of the storm. When insulted, they don't rush to defend. When misunderstood, they don't panic to explain. When ignored, they don't shrink, they stay still inside. And from that stillness, the next step is clear. But this silence does not mean absence of emotion. On the contrary, it means they feel everything. But they are not ruled by anything. This brings us to the second habit, knowing when to be soft and when to be still. Softness is often mistaken for weakness, and strength is often confused with harshness. But a highly intelligent woman has grown beyond these illusions. She has been both too soft and been walked over. She has been too hard and pushed love away. And now, through reflection and self-awareness, she carries both softness and strength in perfect tension. Emotional discipline is the secret art she practices daily, not for the sake of others, but because she respects her own energy. She knows that reacting in anger may feel powerful in the moment, but it depletes her. She knows that always being the one who forgives too quickly, who bends too easily, who stays silent to avoid conflict, costs her dignity in the long run. So she learns a new rhythm. When a man disrespects her boundary, she doesn't scream. She just stops granting him access to her presence. When a friend only calls when they need something, she doesn't scold. She simply stops answering every time. When life overwhelms her, she doesn't collapse. She slows down, listens to her body, and adjusts her pace. This is still, quiet, calm, firm, unshakable. But within that steel there is still softness. The softness to forgive without becoming foolish. The softness to cry without becoming unstable. The softness to love deeply without losing herself. Psychologists describe this as emotional flexibility, the ability to shift between emotional states without becoming stuck. It is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of choice. In relationships, this creates trust. Men, for example, feel more emotionally safe with a woman who can feel deeply, without drowning in her emotions. A woman who can communicate her needs with clarity, not through blame or guilt. A woman who can hold herself with grace, even when things don't go her way. This is not performance. This is maturity, and it draws real intimacy. There's a story of a woman whose husband became cold and distant. For months, she tried everything. Conversations, tears, even silence. But nothing changed. One evening, instead of repeating the same patterns, she calmly said, "I love you, but I will no longer carry the burden of this relationship alone. I am here if you want to rebuild, but I will no longer beg for your presence. That was the first time he truly heard her. Not because she was louder, but because she was clearer. Her words were not emotional threats. They were grounded boundaries, and he could feel the steel beneath her softness. This is the kind of woman people respect. Even if they don't agree with her, they know she means what she says. Her presence is not chaotic. Her love is not desperate. Her emotions are not uncontrolled. She brings peace, and people either rise to meet her or fall away on their own. From a neurological perspective, this emotional regulation strengthens the stras prefrontal cortex, creating a loop of greater resilience. When a woman regulates her emotions well, she creates more safety in her relationships. And when her relationships feel safe, her brain becomes more flexible and adaptive. It's a cycle of self-mastery. But it starts with one habit: pausing, taking a breath before speaking, asking herself, is this reaction aligned with the woman I am becoming? Choosing the tone, the timing, and the truth of her words. And even when she stumbles, which all humans do, she doesn't shame herself. She reflects. She adjusts. She grows. That is emotional intelligence in action. A woman who knows when to be soft and when to be steel is not easy to manipulate. She cannot be guilted into overgiving, nor provoked into regrettable words. She moves with purpose, and this brings an invisible but unmistakable power to her relationships. She doesn't rely on dominance or submission. She lives in balance, and this balance of silence and discernment, of softness and strength, becomes the foundation of her leadership, her love, and her legacy. There is an invisible skill possessed by highly intelligent women that is often overlooked in a world that prioritizes how loudly someone can speak. That skill is observation. She has trained herself to notice, to listen beyond the surface, to remain grounded in awareness, even when the world rushes her to react. This habit is not born from fear, but from discipline. It is a quiet form of power, choosing to understand before being understood. A highly intelligent woman observes more than she speaks, not because she has nothing to say, but because she knows that most people listen only to respond, not to understand. And she has no desire to waste her energy in shallow conversations or surface-level connections. There's a story of a woman who walked into a new workplace. While others rushed to assert themselves, prove their worth, and mark their territory, she sat back for the first few weeks. She watched, she listened, she observed how people spoke, when the manager was present versus when he wasn't. She noted who took credit, who took responsibility, and who remained silent in conflict. By the end of the month, she had built a map, not just of roles and titles, but of personalities, energy, motives, and trustworthiness. This habit of quiet observation allowed her to move with wisdom rather than anxiety. When she eventually spoke, her words carried weight, not because she was louder than others, but because her insight was rooted in presence. And presence is rare. When a woman truly sees people, not through judgment, but through clarity, she earns a level of respect that can't be demanded. Neuroscience supports this. The act of deep observation activates the mirror neuron system, a network in the brain that allows us to empathize and intuitively understand others' emotional states. When a woman trains herself to observe, not just words, but tone, posture, and energy, she sharpens her intuition. This intuition, or what some might call a woman's sixth sense, is not mystical. It is the result of attention combined with emotional literacy. Many women have shared stories of looking back and realizing they saw the red flags, but ignored them. The man who never met their eyes when apologizing. The friend whose praise always had a hint of competition. The colleague who was warm in public but dismissive in private. All the signs were there, but they were buried under the noise of business, distraction, and the desire to assume the best. But the highly intelligent woman does not rush to conclusions, nor does she rush to defend her view. She pauses. She reflects. She notices how people behave when they are angry, when they are happy, when they feel powerful, and when they feel threatened. She listens with all her senses because she understands that people reveal themselves not just in what they say, but in how they say it and in what they choose to stay silent about. In relationships, this habit becomes a form of protection and intimacy at the same time. A woman who observes is not easily fooled by charm. She sees beyond the curated image. She notices the gaps between someone's words and their actions. She watches how a man treats waiters, speaks about his ex, handles rejection, or responds to being corrected. And from these small details, she understands his character. But she also uses her observation to nurture love. She notices when her partner is quiet not because he's distant, but because he's burdened. She senses when something is off, not because he says so, but because his energy is different. And this allows her to show up in ways that create safety, because she is not guessing, she is paying attention. A wise woman once said, "I don't ask many questions. I just watch the answers present themselves." This calm awareness makes her presence magnetic. She listens in a way that makes people feel seen. She notices the small things. How someone's voice changes when they talk about their dream. How their shoulders drop when they finally feel safe. How their eyes light up when they talk about childhood. And because she sees people, people open up to her. But her observation is not passive. She uses it to guide her own behavior as well. She watches her own tone when she's tired. She observes the patterns of her own thoughts when she's feeling insecure. She becomes a student of her inner world. And this is where observation becomes transformation. When she can observe herself without harsh judgment, she is able to change with grace. She notices when she's falling into old habits, people-pleasing, over-explaining, emotional withdrawal. And because she sees these things clearly, she is not a slave to them. This self-awareness brings emotional freedom. It is the difference between saying, "That's just who I am," and saying, "That was who I used to be." From this grounded place of observation, another powerful habit emerges. Creation. A highly intelligent woman is not content simply consuming information, trends, opinions, or approval. She creates space for her mind. She creates time for her well-being. She creates beauty in her surroundings, peace in her relationships, and structure in her days. This creation is not always public. It may not show up on a stage or in a portfolio, but it is real. She writes in her journal. She prepares her meals with intention. She crafts her morning with care. She shapes her environment with purpose. And in doing so, she reminds herself daily, "I am the author of my life," not a passive character waiting for something to happen. There is a difference between movement and motion. One is led by clarity, the other by habit. A woman who is always scrolling, reacting, rushing, checking, she is in motion. But a woman who pauses to create, who reads to grow, writes to reflect, builds to express, that woman is in movement, intentional, directed, alive. This shift from consumption to creation changes everything in relationships. When a woman is always consuming advice, approval, opinions, she loses connection to her own wisdom. She begins to depend on others to tell her what is right, how she should feel, and who she should be. But when she creates, she reclaims that power. Her journal becomes her counselor. Her routines become her sanctuary. Her silence becomes her teacher. In romantic relationships, this habit prevents emotional dependency. She doesn't rely on her partner to provide her sense of purpose or emotional stability. She brings a full life to the table. She creates joy not waits for it. She initiates care, not demands it. And this makes her love generous, not desperate. There's a story of a woman who went through a painful breakup. Her identity had been wrapped in the relationship. After it ended, she found herself lost. For months, she consumed everything: self-help books, online courses, therapy sessions. They all helped, but something was still missing. Then, one day, she picked up her old paintbrush. She hadn't painted in years. As she began to create again, something shifted. The grief didn't disappear, but it transformed. Her art gave her a voice, a mirror, a place to return to herself. She later said, "It wasn't the painting that healed me. It was the reminder that I still had something to offer the world beyond my pain." This is the wisdom of creation. It is not about producing masterpieces. It is about practicing presence. And in that presence, a woman remembers who she is. Science echoes this truth. Engaging in creative activities activates the brain's default mode network, which supports self-reflection, emotional processing, and even problem-solving. When a woman creates, she is not escaping her reality. She is integrating it. This habit also reshapes her relationship with time. She no longer feels like life is happening to her. She becomes a participant, not just a responder. She chooses how to start her day, how to end it, how to rest, and how to reconnect. She doesn't just consume food. She creates nourishment. She doesn't just consume media. She creates boundaries around it. She doesn't just consume relationships. She contributes to them, brings life into them. And as she does, something beautiful happens. Her energy becomes magnetic. People can feel when a woman is living with intention. Her presence carries depth. She doesn't chase attention. She doesn't compete. She simply is. And that is more powerful than any performance. But this creation also requires discipline. It is easier to scroll than to write, easier to react than to build, easier to binge than to reflect. And so, the highly intelligent woman does not wait to feel inspired. She creates a rhythm, a space in her life where creation becomes habit. Whether it's 10 minutes in the morning, a silent walk in the evening, or one day a week unplugged from the world, she commits, and in doing so, she finds herself again and again, not in the noise, but in the quiet act of choosing what she brings into the world. Observation teaches her what is. Creation reminds her what can be. And together, they form the core of a life lived with purpose, not performance. There is a quiet elegance in a woman who does not need to explain her boundaries. She does not announce them with aggression. She does not beg for them to be respected. She does not break herself just to avoid making others uncomfortable. Her boundary is not a brick wall. It is a natural rhythm. And those who can dance with that rhythm stay. Those who cannot fade quietly into the background of her life. A highly intelligent woman understands that boundaries are not about keeping people out. They are about keeping her energy aligned. She has learned through life's experiences that giving too much of herself to people who give too little in return leads to depletion, resentment, and disconnection from her own center. And so her boundaries become sacred, not enforced by force, but by consistency. When a person continually shows that they do not value her time, she does not shout. She simply becomes less available. When someone crosses a line, even subtly, with disrespect or manipulation, she does not plead for them to see her worth. She retreats with grace, with peace, with finality. And in that retreat, she sends a powerful message, not through words, but through behavior. I choose myself. The world often misunderstands women who do this. They are called cold, distant, too proud. But what is missed is the wisdom behind their silence. They have cried behind closed doors. They have bent too far before. They have explained their pain to deaf ears. And in that fire, they were forged not into stone, but into clarity. And clarity has no need to scream. In psychology, the concept of enmeshment refers to a loss of personal boundaries in relationships, where one person's identity becomes so entangled with another's that their sense of self becomes blurred. Highly intelligent women have often lived through such entanglements. They have loved so deeply that they lost themselves, and when the love was not returned with respect, they were left empty. But instead of becoming bitter, they became better. Not louder, but clearer. And from that clarity, they began to rebuild a life where their boundaries were not reactions, but reflections of self-respect. Consider the woman who always said yes. Yes to helping. Yes to staying late. Yes to forgiving without healing. She thought that love meant self-sacrifice, and that being available meant being valuable. But inside, she was quietly breaking. No one noticed because she didn't show it. Until one day, she could no longer give what she didn't have. She reached the edge of burnout, not just physically, but emotionally. It was in that stillness, after exhaustion had emptied her, that she realized something sacred. No one was going to give her the life she deserved unless she claimed it. And claiming it meant boundaries. She began small, turning her phone off after 8 p.m., not explaining why, just doing it, saying no to events she didn't feel aligned with, canceling plans when her body needed rest, refusing to respond to disrespect, even if it came with compliments. And slowly, the world around her adjusted. Some people drifted away. Others grew closer, now treating her with the respect she had begun to show herself. A woman who does not explain her boundaries is not unkind. She is simply no longer available for dynamics that dishonor her. She knows that a man who is right for her will not require her to shrink, to overextend, or to explain herself endlessly just to be understood. He will read her silences. He will respect her rhythm. He will value her peace. In relationship dynamics, this becomes a filtering mechanism. People who are accustomed to testing others' limits through guilt, emotional manipulation, or subtle coercion will quickly find no entry point. She does not engage in emotional tug of war. She lets go, even if it hurts, because to her, no connection is worth the price of abandoning herself. There is a quote that says, "Your boundary is not up for discussion. If someone doesn't like it, they are free to walk away." The highly intelligent woman embodies this truth, not as a defense mechanism, but as a lived philosophy. She has nothing to prove. Her presence is her answer. Her absence is her answer. Her peace is her answer. But boundaries are not only about others. They are also about herself. She sets boundaries with her own tendencies to overthink, to self-criticize, to revisit wounds that are trying to heal. She notices when her mind is spiraling into old stories, stories where she wasn't enough, wasn't loved, wasn't chosen. And she gently says to herself, "Not today. I no longer live there." But this self-boundary becomes an act of inner leadership. She is no longer at the mercy of every thought or emotion. She respects her own energy too much to allow it to be wasted on regret or revenge. Her attention becomes sacred currency, and she spends it only on what aligns with her truth. One woman shared how she used to let people explain away their bad behavior. He didn't mean it. She's just under stress. They're doing their best. But over time, she realized that constantly making room for others' inconsistency was erasing her own integrity. She wasn't just allowing them to mistreat her. She was teaching them that it was acceptable. And so she shifted. Now, when someone apologizes but doesn't change, she walks away. When someone makes promises but never follows through, she adjusts her expectations, not with resentment, with clarity, because she has learned that love without respect is not love, and attention without consistency is not commitment. In romantic relationships, this kind of woman is both mysterious and grounding. Mysterious because she cannot be easily predicted or controlled. Grounding because her energy brings clarity. Her partner feels the safety of her standards. He knows that love with her is deep, but it is not free of responsibility. She will not chase. She will not convince. She will not compromise her core just to keep someone interested. This is not power through domination. It is power through self-possession. She knows who she is. She knows what she values. And she knows that anyone who tries to cross her limits under the disguise of love is not offering love at all. Eastern philosophy teaches that a woman in harmony with herself becomes like water, soft, yet able to shape mountains. She does not resist life, but she flows with it. And part of that flow is knowing when to say no, when to step back, when to protect the space that allows her to flourish. That protection is not always obvious. Sometimes it's turning off the news. Sometimes it's not engaging in family drama. Sometimes it's not giving an emotional response when someone is clearly trying to provoke one. And sometimes it's simply choosing silence instead of arguing with someone committed to misunderstanding her. There is great peace in not needing to explain everything, in trusting that what is aligned will stay and what is not will fall away. Boundaries are not built in one day. They are shaped through years of experiences, moments of heartbreak, and the quiet decision to never abandon oneself again. A woman who has been through betrayal, disappointment, and confusion eventually arrives at this sacred place. I know how it feels to be treated poorly. I won't allow it again, not from others and not from myself. And so, her life becomes simpler, not because there is no conflict, but because there is less confusion. Her yes is full of presence. Her no is full of peace. And she no longer feels the need to justify either. A woman who walks in this way transforms the atmosphere around her. People become more intentional in her presence, more respectful, not out of fear, but out of admiration. They sense that this is not someone you can have love, not someone you can give breadcrumbs to, not someone you can guilt or gaslight or gradually wear down. This woman has returned home to herself. And in doing so, she teaches others how to treat her, not through lectures, but through embodiment. If someone asks, "Why don't you allow this?" she doesn't answer with a speech. She just smiles and walks away, because her boundary is not an explanation. It is a reflection of her self-worth, and it does not require permission. There is something deeply powerful about a woman who treats herself with dignity, not only in her speech or posture, but in her daily rituals. Not the grand gestures that the world claps for, but the quiet, repetitive actions she performs when no one is watching. These small rituals, often dismissed as unimportant, are actually the architecture of her self-respect. They are the proof of how she values herself, not in theory, but in practice. A highly intelligent woman understands that confidence is not an accident. It is a result of how she speaks to herself, how she feeds herself, how she rests, moves, dresses, listens, walks, and returns to her own center. These things may seem ordinary, but they create her identity. They form the soil from which her relationships, decisions, and inner peace grow. It begins the moment she wakes. A woman in alignment doesn't reach for her phone first thing in the morning. She reaches for stillness, for intention, for presence. She understands that the first thoughts she entertains will shape the mood of her day. And so she creates a morning rhythm that reminds her who she is before the world tries to tell her who to be. It may be a few deep breaths, a warm drink, a handwritten reflection, a few silent moments by the window, not because she has to, but because she honors herself enough to begin her day with awareness. There's a story of a woman who was constantly exhausted. not just from work, but from the emotional demands of everyone around her. Children, co-workers, a partner who took more than he gave. She began to lose her sense of self. Her mood became reactive, her body always tense. One day, she was given a simple suggestion: spend 10 minutes each morning doing something just for herself, something that grounds her. At first, she resisted. That won't change anything, she thought. But she tried. Just 10 minutes, sitting quietly with a journal, no interruptions, no phone, no noise. In 3 weeks, everything changed. Not because her life got easier, but because as she became more stable, she noticed she was less reactive. She made better decisions. She felt more rooted in her conversations. That simple ritual, 10 minutes a day, became her sanctuary. What this reveals is simple. Self-respect is cumulative. You don't build it through one dramatic act of courage. You build it through daily rituals that remind you of your worth, especially in seasons where others don't see it. A woman who practices this does not look for validation in unhealthy places. She doesn't need a man's constant reassurance to feel beautiful, because she has already taken the time to care for her body with gentleness. She doesn't rely on external applause to feel accomplished, because she already witnessed herself complete what she promised. Even if it was just drinking water, finishing a walk, or writing one honest paragraph, her small wins accumulate. They add up, they become her quiet strength, and this strength reflects in her relationships. A woman who respects herself becomes more selective, not out of arrogance, but out of awareness. She doesn't entertain empty conversations. She doesn't allow inconsistent people to drain her. She doesn't stay in dynamics where she has to repeatedly explain why she deserves care. She's not harsh about it. She just knows that she doesn't have to sacrifice her rituals, her rhythm, or her peace to be loved. The love she desires must match the love she already gives herself. Psychology tells us that rituals create safety in the brain. The human nervous system thrives on predictability. When a woman creates consistent rituals, morning walks, journaling, breathwork, mindful cooking, she communicates to her brain, you are safe, you are grounded, you are cared for. This sense of internal safety translates into how she handles external challenges. Imagine a woman in an emotionally unpredictable relationship. One day, he is attentive. The next, cold and distant. Her heart, constantly confused, begins to question her worth. But because she has anchored herself in daily rituals, she doesn't fall apart. She may feel pain, yes, but she knows how to return to herself. She has trained her nervous system to recognize home, not in another person, but within her own body and breath. This is not theory, it's muscle memory. A woman who nourishes herself daily builds emotional resilience. Her rituals remind her, no matter what happens out there, I have me. And that reminder is what keeps her from spiraling when the world disappoints her. There's a woman who made it a practice to light a candle every evening before bed. It sounds simple, but for her, it symbolized something sacred, that even after a chaotic day, she could return to light. That flame became a meditation, a prayer, a commitment. On nights when she was heartbroken, she still lit it. On nights when she was happy, she lit it. On nights when she felt nothing at all, she still lit it. That consistency became a healing force, a reminder that even if everything around her felt unstable, she was still showing up for herself. And that's the essence of daily rituals. They are not meant to fix you. They are meant to remind you of your dignity, of your strength, of your beauty, of your sacredness. In relationships, this has powerful implications. A woman rooted in ritual will not chase emotional highs. She doesn't need constant drama to feel alive. Her inner world is already rich. She brings calm into relationships, not chaos. She listens better, speaks slower, responds more wisely, because she's not coming from a place of scarcity. She's full. And that fullness is felt. She becomes magnetic, not because of what she says, but because of the peace she carries. A man might not even know why. He feels safe around her. He just does. Because her energy is not scattered. Her attention is not desperate. Her presence is not demanding. She's simply there, whole, grounded, present. This also gives her the strength to walk away when necessary, not out of rage, but out of reverence for herself. She doesn't slam doors. She simply closes them, quietly, without a need to be understood. Because her rituals have taught her that solitude is not punishment. It is a return. She knows how to be alone without being lonely. Because in her rituals, she has befriended herself. One of the most powerful things a woman can do is to treat herself the way she wishes others would treat her. Speak to herself with kindness. Feed herself with love. Dress herself with grace. Rest herself with permission. Move herself with respect. When she does this consistently, the world around her begins to mirror it. There's a well-known saying, you teach people how to treat you by how you treat yourself. This is not just a concept. It is a pattern that plays out again and again. When a woman constantly abandons her own needs to please others, people begin to believe that her needs don't matter. Not because they're cruel, but because she modeled that behavior. But when she consistently honors her own space, energy, and rhythm, others learn. This is a woman who must be met with presence or not at all. In the realm of self-mastery, rituals become more than habits. They become spiritual practices, a way of saying every single day, I am worthy, I am whole, I am responsible for my energy. And this responsibility is not a burden. It is a liberation, because once a woman claims it, she no longer waits for others to fill her cup. She fills it daily, carefully, joyfully. In Eastern philosophy, there is the idea that the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. How you fold your clothes, how you pour your tea, how you take your steps. All of it is a reflection of your inner state. A woman who rushes through her day with tension may not even notice the toll it takes on her relationships. But a woman who pauses to breathe while tying her hair, who arranges her home with intention, who sits with her meals, she brings that same presence into her interactions with others. Presence is the fruit of ritual, and presence is love's greatest offering. Imagine being in a relationship with someone who is fully present, who doesn't check their phone while you speak, who remembers what you said yesterday, who notices your mood before you say a word. That kind of attention is rare, and it begins with how one treats themselves, because a woman cannot offer presence to another if she is absent from herself. So these daily rituals, though small, are not insignificant. They are the roots of her inner garden. If she neglects them, her energy becomes fragile. But if she waters them, her energy becomes a source of strength, not just for her, but for those around her. There is no perfect ritual. Some women dance each morning. Others sit in stillness. Some write letters they'll never send. Others walk in nature, barefoot, feeling the earth. Some pray. Some stretch. Some sing. What matters is not what she does. What matters is that she does it for herself. Not to perform. Not to impress. But to return. Return to center. Return to self. Return to truth. And when she does, again and again, her relationships change. Not because others suddenly become better, but because as she does, she becomes a woman who knows what she needs. A woman who gives from overflow, not depletion. A woman who walks into rooms, not hoping to be chosen, but already knowing she is whole. And this wholeness, it cannot be faked, it must be lived. And it is lived one ritual at a time. When a woman begins to live with this kind of intention, when her habits are rooted in self-respect, her silence is sacred, Her emotions are disciplined. Her mind is observant. Her life is creative. Her boundaries are clear. And her rituals are consistent. She no longer walks through the world searching for her worth. She embodies it. She no longer asks, "Am I enough?" because she feels enough in how she rises in the morning. She no longer wonders, "Will they stay?" because she no longer clings to those who must be convinced. She becomes a woman whose presence speaks before her words do. Not because she is loud, but because she is aligned. And in that alignment, her relationships shift. Her standards rise. Her circle refines. She no longer fears being alone because she's never disconnected from herself. She no longer settles for crumbs because she prepares a feast within her own soul. Her life becomes her message. Her energy becomes her boundary. Her habits become her protection. And those who wish to walk beside her must first learn to walk with the same integrity she shows herself every single day. That is the mark of a highly intelligent woman, quietly powerful, deeply present, unapologetically whole,